In a small, quiet town nestled in the heart of a dark and mysterious forest, there stood an old, abandoned mental hospital. For years, the townsfolk had whispered tales of the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. The hospital had been shrouded in a thick veil of fear, and the mere mention of it sent shivers down the spines of those brave enough to acknowledge its existence. It was a moonless night when four adventurous friends, Tom, Sarah, Mike, and Lisa, decided to explore the abandoned mental hospital. They believed the legends were nothing more than stories told to scare curious children. Armed with flashlights and a sense of invincibility, they approached the menacing structure. The massive iron gates creaked ominously as they pushed them open, and the group stepped into the eerie silence of the hospital grounds. The building loomed before them, its windows shattered and its walls covered in ivy. The wind howled through the broken panes, creating an unsettling symphony of eerie sounds. Inside, the air was heavy with the weight of 1,000 memories, each one more disturbing than the last. The friends ventured deeper, their flashlights cutting through the darkness like knives. The corridors seemed endless, and they soon realized they were lost in a labyrinth of haunted hallways. Suddenly, a chilling gust of wind swept through the corridor, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic set in as they were plunged into darkness. A distant sound, like the whispering of tormented souls, filled the air. It was the ghosts of the abandoned mental hospital, and they were awakened by the intruders. The friends fumbled to relight their flashlights, their trembling hands struggling to find the switches. As the beams of light pierced the blackness, they caught glimpses of ghastly apparitions. Faces twisted in pain and despair, eyes devoid of light, and tattered hospital gowns trailing behind them. The ghosts drew closer, their moans and wails growing louder, filling the air with a spine-tingling chorus of agony. Tom, Sarah, Mike, and Lisa were paralyzed with fear as the spectral figures surrounded them. The ghosts of former patients who had endured unimaginable suffering in the hospital had returned, seeking retribution. The friends pleaded for mercy, but the ghosts remained relentless, their ethereal forms reaching out to touch the living. Cold fingers brushed against their skin, sending a shock of terror through their bodies. As the friends huddled together, the ghosts' tormented souls seemed to grow more powerful with each passing moment. They were trapped in a nightmare, unable to escape the clutches of the malevolent spirits. Time seemed to stand still as the ghosts closed in, their vengeful presence intensifying. The friends were on the brink of madness, their sanity slipping away as they faced the horrifying truth of the abandoned mental hospital. And as the night wore on, the hospital's dark secrets unraveled, revealing a history of cruelty, experimentation, and suffering beyond imagination. The ghosts were cursed to relive their torment, forever bound to the place where their lives had been stolen. The suspense and horror of that night were etched into the minds of those who survived, a warning to all who dared to tread upon the haunted grounds of the abandoned mental hospital. In a desolate corner of the town, veiled in perpetual mist and shadow, loomed the forsaken remnants of the Fairhaven Mental Hospital. It had stood silent for decades, a towering monument to human suffering, a place of despair where the echoes of tormented souls refused to fade away. The hospital had been abandoned under mysterious circumstances. No one dared to venture near it, and the townsfolk had whispered of the malevolent spirits that lurked within its crumbling walls. But curiosity has a way of pulling people into darkness, and one fateful night, 5 friends decided to uncover the truth. Samantha, the adventurous leader of the group, gathered her friends, John, Emily, Daniel, and Grace, for a journey into the unknown. Armed with flashlights and trembling resolve, they pushed through the rusted gates and entered the hospital's haunted domain. Inside, the air was thick with dread, and the stench of suffering hung heavy. The friends navigated a maze of decaying corridors, their footsteps echoing like eerie heartbeats. Shadows danced on the walls, creating macabre silhouettes that seemed to move on their own. Suddenly, a chilling breeze cut through the stillness, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic set in as darkness enveloped them. A sinister laughter echoed through the air, a mocking taunt from the spirits that had awoken. As the friends struggled to reignite their flashlights, a distant whispering filled the air. A choir of anguished souls, the ghosts of the abandoned mental hospital, moaning and wailing with unspeakable agony. They drew closer, their spectral forms taking shape in the gloom. The ghosts' eyes glowed with a malevolent light, their twisted faces contorted with pain. They were the souls of former patients who had endured unimaginable suffering and torture within these very walls. Now, they sought revenge, and the intruders were their prey. The friends huddled together, paralyzed with fear, as the ghostly figures closed in. The spirits reached out, their icy fingers brushing the living skin, sending shivers of terror through their bodies. Their pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears as the ghosts remained relentless. The tormented souls circled the intruders, a relentless storm of suffering and vengeance. Each ghost whispered their tragic tales, each more horrific than the last. Time seemed to warp as the night wore on, and the hospital's dark secrets unfolded before the terrified group. It was a place of nightmares, where patients had been subjected to inhumane experiments and cruel treatments. The ghosts were condemned to relive their torment, forever bound to the asylum that had stolen their lives. As dawn broke, the surviving friends stumbled out of the hospital, their minds scarred by the horrors they had witnessed. The ghosts of the abandoned mental hospital remained, their silent screams echoing through the desolate halls, a chilling warning to all who dared to trespass. And so, the forsaken Fairhaven Mental Hospital remained a cursed sanctuary. A place where the dead and the living intersected in a perpetual dance of terror, leaving an indelible mark on the souls who dared to venture into its malevolent depths. In a quiet and desolate town, shrouded in a thick mist, stood the imposing figure of the abandoned mental hospital. This place was known to all as the most dreadful sight in the region, and for good reason. For years, it had been the home to the tormented souls of the past, where the line between the living and the dead blurred. Long ago, the hospital had been a place of healing, or so it claimed. But as the years passed, whispers began to spread of the terrible experiments conducted within its grim walls. Patients were subjected to treatments that would send shivers down the spine of even the bravest souls. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the overgrown grounds, a group of curious teenagers gathered at the entrance of the hospital. They had heard the stories, the legends of the ghostly apparitions that still roamed the darkened corridors, and they dared each other to spend the night inside. The doors creaked open with a haunting groan as they entered. The air inside was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant howl of the wind. Their flashlights cast eerie shadows on the cracked walls as they ventured deeper into the hospital's depths. The story had it that the most malevolent spirits resided in the basement, and that's where their curiosity led them. With every step they took down the narrow, dimly lit staircase, the oppressive atmosphere grew thicker, making it harder to breathe. The group reached the basement, and there, in the dim light, they saw something that froze their blood. The walls were lined with rusted cages, and within them were the remnants of the patient's possessions. Tattered clothing, rotting toys, and rusty restraints. It was a chilling sight, and they realized the horrors that must have unfolded in this forsaken place. As the teens continued exploring, they suddenly heard whispers, faint but undeniable. The voices seemed to come from all around, and they were filled with anguish and despair. It was as if the tortured souls of the past were trying to communicate their suffering to the living. In the midst of the eerie whispers, they glimpsed shadowy figures that moved with unnatural grace. These were the ghosts, the lingering spirits of the former patients, their faces twisted in eternal torment. The air grew colder, and their flashlights flickered as the apparitions drew near. In a panic, the teenagers fled deeper into the basement, hoping to find an escape. But the corridors seemed to twist and turn, leading them in circles, and they realized they were trapped in a never-ending nightmare. The ghosts continued to draw closer, their mournful cries filling the air. As the teens huddled in fear, they heard a voice, distant yet reassuring, guiding them to an old service elevator. They rushed inside and frantically pushed the button to ascend. The elevator jolted to life, and with a sudden lurch, they were lifted back to the ground floor. Gasping for breath, they stumbled out into the misty night, leaving the abandoned mental hospital behind. The harrowing experience had left them forever changed, with a deep-seated fear of the supernatural and a respect for the restless spirits that still haunted that dreadful place.